and we want to leave everything else behind. And then what happens is you leave an entire wasteland of all this black potential, black talent, and all these black people that have nowhere to go because you allowed them to take the very best that you have to offer. They took your best athletes, they took your best entertainers, they take your best of everything. And then when you're done, when you're worthless, then University of Texas will drop that Negro off, the Negro who was playing football for them or whatever. They will drop him off back at the hood, back with his mama, and he's sitting, next thing you know, 10 years later, he's sitting on the corner with a liquor bottle in his hand with 8 babies' mamas talking about how he used to be quarterback at the University of Texas. That's kind of that's pretty much how that system works. So anyway, paradigm 2 is what Dr. Anderson refers to as vertical integration. So we're going to talk about vertical integration, and he also talks a little bit about the hair care industry in a second. So page 51 of Powernomics, powernomics.com. That's Dr. Claude Anderson's website. I encourage everybody to get his books. Now that we understand the concept of ethno-aggregation and the process of pooling group resources, let us move on to the second empowerment paradigm, vertical integration. Vertical integration is a directional paradigm that comes into play after blacks as a group have ethno-aggregated around their most common and prominent characteristics. There is a commonly accepted rule in sociology of when ethnic groups are wedged in hierarchies of wealth, power, and privilege, competitive conflicts are inevitable. Vertical integration empowers blacks to be territorial and vertically mobile. It places black self-interest first and propels blacks in an upward economic direction because that is where this nation's wealth and power are localized. Wealth, income, businesses, privileges, and resource powers are fixed in parallel, with whiteness at the top of the resource ladder and blackness at the bottom. Wealth and power resources are continuously and disproportionately distributed to those at the top first. These resources circulate horizontally among members of the white in-group before portions of the wealth and power trickle down to blacks and other outgroups at the lower levels. On the bottom level, black Americans get what those above either did not want or did not need. Either way, the result is the same. It is always too little, too late. However, we have a choice. We can continue to wait, hoping for those at the top to have a change of heart and share some of this nation's vast fortune, but that is against the grain of history and not likely to occur. Our best remaining option is to implement a national plan with strategies for moving up the nation's pecking order and compete for wealth and power at resources at every level. Let's go back to the secret when you talk about wealth. And let me summarize a lot of what Dr. Anderson's talking about here. I'm going to summarize with one of the lessons in the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So in the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which I haven't read the book entirely, so I'd be lying if I read the whole thing. But I don't need to read the whole thing. I have a PhD in finance. I understand the ideas behind the book. The guy has 2 dads, right? And he has the poor dad, who is the dad who is actually the hardest working dad that he has. His biological dad gets up and goes to work every day, just like my dad did, and he gets a paycheck, an honest paycheck, and that's how he pays the bills and all that. Does he know where the money comes from? Not necessarily, right? He understands a basic idea, which is if I learn a skill and fill out a job application, then someone with money will pay me money in order to do that skill and do that thing. And I don't know where the money came from. I really don't care. I don't care how the company runs. I don't care about the shareholders. I don't care about the amount of debt the company took on. I don't care about any of that. I don't care about the revenue streams, profit margins. All I care about is that I did a job and I got a check, and that's it. So in a way, you can think of it like a tower. You can think of the money like a tower. Like somebody's pouring money into that company. Somehow that money's getting in there. And it's typically because somebody's selling a product to a customer, or a bank is making a loan, or investors are providing capital. But somehow money's being poured in to this tower. And the poor dad is at the bottom of the tower, and it's trickling down, right? The shareholders are the big dogs. They're eating first. The managers eat after the shareholders. And then after the managers eat and the shareholders eat and the bank eats, then he gets whatever's left at the bottom. That's why workers get screwed in America, because in this vertical tower, the worker is at the very bottom feeding, waiting for whatever comes down, hoping that something trickles down to them. That's why trickle-down economics doesn't work, because human beings are greedy. Human beings don't really share unless you make them share. So his rich dad said, Why would you want to learn a skill and then get money for your skill when really your goal isn't to learn the skill? Your goal is to learn how to make the money. So he's basically saying, cut out the middleman. Just figure out where's the money's coming from and figure out how to make the money. Right? So that might mean basically when you talk about owning businesses and things like that and developing industry in our community. Well, now instead of waiting for the paycheck that you get, after the people who've collected all the capital decide what they want to give you, you're actually supplying the capital and finding the capital. You're the one going to the bank to get the loan. You're the one that's pulling together the investors that are going to make the investment. You're the one that's selling the product to the customer. So the money touches your hands first, and then you get to decide how the money is going to trickle down. So vertical integration is kind of saying, let's go all the way to the top. Let's cut out that damn middleman. This means that when you're talking about how we train our kids, you don't train your kids to get a job. You train your kids to create a job. And then if they have to get a job, they do it. But they also have the option of creating a job in case there's no jobs available. That way, they're not hoping that they can succeed economically by being really nice to white people, hoping that they will trickle down some sort of scraps and crumbs and crap that they can pick up off the floor, hoping that somebody feeds them. So vertical integration basically says that in those industries where black people dominate, when you talk about things like the hair care industry, Lord Jesus, we spend all that money in the hair care industry. We're providing all the capital in that industry. We should be the ones controlling that industry from top to bottom. We should be doing the work at the bottom, the middle, and the top in order to really manage and make sure we get our piece of the pie. That's the only way you can compete in America. So the other thing, too, about that is when you're talking about your celebrities and you're talking about all your wealthy black people that are supposedly doing well, none of those people are impressive to me until they show me that they're developing industry or some sort of vertically integrated process that includes black people all the way from the bottom to the very, very top. And maybe they're doing some of that. Sometimes they're doing some of these things. But when you're talking about things like creating jobs and opportunities and possibilities and all that, I think that needs to be the dominant conversation. There's no celebrity that impresses me by how much money he has in the bank or how many records he sold or all this other stuff or talking a big game. Kanye West, I like the guy. I told you guys I met him on the phone. He was nice enough, but I wasn't impressed with him because all he did was tell me he literally told me he was worth $4 billion. I did not give a shit. I don't care how much money you're worth. Tell me that you created 10,000 jobs for black people. That will impress me. You bragging about how much money you have just means that you still have insecurities that are being filled by this outsized ego where you need everyone to celebrate you, where my job and my goal in life is to celebrate us as a people and to say, how can we all win? You can still be as great as you want to be, but my Lord, sitting up there and us celebrating this demagoguery in the community, we got to stop that. That fits in the category of inappropriate behavior. When we are sitting around worshiping people who have clearly made a point, not to say Kanye's in this category, I'm gonna pull him off the table because I don't want to be insulting, but literally you're honoring people who pretty much said that they wouldn't even pee on you if you were in 100-degree heat. These are people who literally have said, I'm better than you. I don't care about you. I don't care about your kids. I don't even like you. And you honor these people. What are you honoring? My Lord, get some self-esteem. I only honor you if you honor me back. I'm only going to support you if you support me back. If you're not supporting me and the people I care about, then you don't really matter. So really, I would say to you that when you're talking about the next generation, in terms of what Black wealth creation actually looks like, it has to be something that's built around all of us. It has to be something that's built to scale. And what I really suspect is going on. Somebody mentioned Devin Robinson here. I got to text Devin back. Devin sent me a text on my old phone. I did not hit him back. Thank you for reminding me. I'm gonna text him back. And if anybody knows Devin, tell him I'm sorry. And Devin makes me think about the fact that you have all these diamonds in the rough. You have all these amazing Black people in your community who are brilliant at the development of industry. They're great at creating jobs. They're excellent at starting businesses and LLCs and everything else. But the problem is they don't get any attention because all the attention gets soaked up by these entertainers who are pretty much worthless. But they've impressed white people, so white people put them on TV and say, these are the new Black leaders, and these are the leaders in the community, and these are the success stories. No, they're not. Those are not the success stories. The success story in the Black community that is going to pull us out of this nonsense is going to be, that black woman who starts a small business and ends up hiring 800 people, or that black man who gets together with his wife and starts an excellent business where they've got 5 dozen employees. Those are the heroes in the community. Those are the people who not only are able to create opportunities and gather resources, but those are the ones who have the high-minded level of thinking required to nation build. An employee or someone who only knows how to pick up a check, no disrespect to, I don't even want to say it like that because I don't want it to seem like being an employee is a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. We've all been employees. But a person who doesn't really understand how to develop something out of nothing still hasn't reached their potential when it comes to being a fully functional, fully capable economic being in this country. So as a black person with children, you really have to make sure your kids understand that whole tower from the top to the bottom. They don't want to just understand how to do the job. You want to understand what people are doing at the very top to make that whole company exist. One of the things I think is good to do is read the origin stories of some of these outstanding companies that exist in America. Look up the fact that UPS, which is now worth hundreds of billions of dollars, that it was started by 2 teenagers who were delivering packages on their bicycle 100 years ago. Look up the origins of Walmart and how Sam Walton started that first store that scaled up into this multi-billion-dollar corporation. These origin stories, those are the secret keys. Like, those are the things that are going to really make a difference in terms of moving the needle for black people. It's not going to be some Negro on TV or somebody who had a great album or somebody who played in the NBA. It's going to be somebody who has the ability to have a vision that involves economic nation building. So let's keep going. We're going to read about vertical integration versus ethno-aggregation. So Dr. Anderson talks about something he calls the power T. He says vertical integration working hand in hand with ethno-aggregation is symbolized by the power T. And he has a figure of the power T. I wish I could put it up on the screen, but I can't. I'll just describe it to you. A group aggregates and concentrates its resources at the base of the stem for the T for maximum strength. Once blacks have concentrated their resources, they should move up and stem toward the crossbar at the top. Okay, so let me see if I can describe this to you. Okay, so he says that you gather your resources in vertical aggregation. You gather all your resources together. You ethno-aggregate. That means you come together, and then you start pushing it up that ladder, up that tower. Okay, and he says now the old model, which was designed by what they call social integration, is an upside down T. And what that looks like basically is everybody's kind of gathered at the bottom. So black people, because we're trying to integrate and we're spreading ourselves thin and weakening ourselves, we never develop a power base because we're trying to be everywhere all the time with everybody. And so one of the arguments that has been made consistently, and I think successfully, is that integration really weakened the black community. If you think about this, imagine if you've got 4 siblings who are all hardworking people and very intelligent people, and all of you each individually go get your separate jobs and you're living your separate lives. Each of you individually has very little power in the space that you operate. All of you go to work every day. You're the only black person in the department. You can't really get anything done. You're outnumbered on every vote. You have no choice but to water yourself down so you can fit in and hope that you don't get fired. But if you come together, all 5 of you come together and say, we're going to pool our resources. We're going to aggregate our money. We're going to aggregate our skill. We're going to aggregate our labor. And we're also going to, because mama or daddy or somebody in the family taught us how to be high-minded enough to know how to go fill out the paperwork to start an LLC and create a business and have business meetings. We know how to operate at the top of that tower. Then suddenly you've got a power base. And that flips racism on its head. You see, Dr. Anderson, one area where Dr. Anderson and I, I'm not gonna say we disagree. We don't disagree, but I have a slightly different perspective. He always says that black people don't have the ability to be racist. Right? Anybody ever heard that? Where he says that black people can't be racist because we don't have the power to create a system that separates people based on race. I completely agree with him when you're talking about America at large. Like we can't go out in this country and decide that we're going to put all the white people at the bottom. That would be almost impossible for us to do. But what I would throw in there is a little tiny nuance, and I would say, without disagreeing, but I would add this. I would say, actually, if you control the size and the scale, the scope of your environment, if you create kind of a microcosm of your environment, like a little space that's yours, you actually do have the power to be as racist as you want to be. Meaning that if you concentrate, if you come together, if 20 black people come together and say, we're running this little circle right here, this $2 million a year coming into this company is controlled by us. Well, you then have flipped racism on its head, because in that space, you're the one making the decisions. Just ask any white person who's ever taught at an HBCU. You know, I knew a white guy who was a really great professor who said, I taught at an HBCU, and he said it really taught me what it feels like to be black at a white university. He said, because black people were always outvoting me and outnumbering me, because he was in a black space for the most part, right? So my argument is that if you want to be in a space where you have the power, then you have to aggregate. You know, and other groups get this. That's why they have Little Havana and little, you know, the Jewish community will say, well, the Jewish people, they own the next 5 blocks. So in these 5 blocks, if you ain't Jewish, then you are going to be treated like a second-class citizen, because these are the blocks that we control. So for you, I ask you to ask yourself, what block do we control? Start with your family. If you have good relatives, if you're fortunate enough to have that, maybe you create your business in your space that's controlled by you. If you don't have good relatives, then go find some people that you can work with. Join groups and clubs and organizations. That's where the convention, I think, is very beneficial, because at the All Black National Convention, people come together and they form businesses on the spot. They form coalitions on the spot. They get together and do groups on the spot. And the people there are good. The people there are high-minded superheroes that you don't meet anywhere else. I had a conversation today with a guy who was at the convention last year, we're gonna do an event together in Detroit as well. His name is Herb Strather. He's out of Detroit. Herb told me, he said, yeah, tomorrow we're closing on a $30 million real estate deal. We have faculty in the Black Business School who've done billions of dollars worth of hotel deals. So you can't tell me that they're not just as good or better than any white guy out there. They might not have full access to the entire banking system, but my Lord, if you're able to do multi-million-dollar deals working with the scraps that our community is presented with, that makes you a genius in my book. So you've got your geniuses in the community, but that ethno-aggregation allows you to formulate a capital basis so that your geniuses can really be brilliant. And in fact, actually, and I'm talking about geniuses, but I'm not going to throw myself in that category, because that would make me just an absolute prick. But what I will say is this: I'm good at what I do. I can sit down with any scholar on the planet and talk about economics, and I don't feel intimidated at all. I've sat down with the smartest people on the planet or on earth and never once flinched. And so here's the thing: the only space where I'm able to really be as great as I believe I can be is when I'm in this space with you. Why? Well, because we have ethno-aggregated our resources, our time, our blackness. We've all come together. We've created this space where there are a few thousand of you who gather with me to talk about Black economics and powernomics, and that is the space that allows me to shine. That is where I can be Boyce Watkins. That is where I can really let it out and do my thing. I can't go into Yale University and be the same scholar that I am with you, because that dilutes my superpower. My superpower is blackness. My superpower is that panther behind my head. That's my superpower. So what you want to do is be very conscious of what environment you operate in, and what environment your children operate in, because you want to be in a space that celebrates your superpower. You don't want to be surrounded by kryptonite. When you're surrounded by kryptonite, then you're going to feel weak. You're going to feel unempowered. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to feel diluted, and you're going to feel like a minority. And I hate that word minority, but that's what you're going to feel like when you go into spaces where you don't belong. All right, so let me keep reading here. All right, so Dr. Anderson says those blacks who reach the top of the T can then capture new territory by moving horizontally into non-black communities and pursuing political and business opportunities. So he says basically, when you establish your stronghold, right, you get that business where you're controlling it from the top to the bottom, then you're able to then start becoming assertive and conquering new territory and going into new industries, because now you've got something that every wealthy person has, which is a capital base. It is a capital base. Not having a capital base is like trying to run a 100-meter dash on slippery ice, slippery thin ice. You can't run a 100-meter dash when you're running on slippery ice, and the ice might crack below your feet, that you don't have a base. So ultimately, a capital base allows you the ability to go out into the world and conquer new territory. You can make new investments, things like that. A lot of the reason that so many of our people feel like they're struggling and stumbling along through life is because they don't have a capital base. They don't have a place they can go to in case times get hard. The recession hits, we're stuck. COVID hits, we're stuck. We don't know what to do because we don't have that capital base. And the capital base might be some cash, it might be some stock, it might be some real estate that we have to back us up, it might be a group that we're connected to where we share resources, right? So the question is, what is your home base? The home base is what allows you to stretch and expand into different territory. If you have no home base, then you can't conquer anything. You can't expand into any territory. In fact, that's how the Roman Empire died. The Roman Empire died because they didn't protect their home base. They kept trying to expand and integrate all throughout the world. Next thing you know, their home base gets invaded and Rome is no more. Okay, so let me keep reading here. Black Americans as a group cannot improve their wealth and power holdings by advancing a horizontal social integration like the Roman Empire. You spread yourself too thin, you're going to get your ass kicked every time. Wealth, power, and other resources are not stored horizontally in a pecking order, nor are they stored on the same level with Black Americans. Black Americans are locked into a caste system upon which this nation's class system rests. Horizontal movement places Blacks in economic competition with poor whites who have yet to ascend the pecking order. So when you socially integrate and they start treating you the same as poor white people, then you're gonna lose that game. James Clyburn does that a lot. James Clyburn, I think Dr. Anderson was complaining about Clyburn the other day when we were talking, and he said that Clyburn said something interesting about reparations, that he would support reparations if poor whites also got reparations. So that pretty much tells you who he works for, right? And it's interesting because then what's happened is when they start talking about poor white people in the same voice as Black people and what we've gone through and what we deserve, it creates an impossible burden. It's a lot like if you want to go outside and you're thinking that your mom is going to tell you to clean your room before you can go outside, and you're willing to do that, but then she says, "No, I want you to clean the whole entire house and the neighbor's house." Well, you're going to give up because that's too much. That's going to take too long, right? And so I remember feeling that same way when I met a white woman who was like a liberal white woman who said something to me when I was 19, and I talked about race and racism and economic disparities because I was just kind of discovering this stuff. And she said, "Well, no, what we need to do is stop focusing on race and get rid of poverty." And I remember thinking, I don't know how to get rid of poverty. Like, that would take forever. America is always going to have poverty. There's always going to be people who are poorer than other people. So you're telling me I got to eliminate poverty before I can even begin to address race? Don't get caught in that type of thinking. Don't let anybody trap you in that mindset. You can focus on your race first. It's okay to do that. So he says also, horizontal movement locks Blacks into competition with immigrants and other evolving minorities. Multiculturalism, cultural diversity in a colorblind society give the illusion of progress. Blacks were convinced into believing that aligning with ethnic immigrants who have been in this country less than 30 years is somehow progress for Black people. Aligning with these immigrant groups and their horizontal issues detoured Blacks. Moreover, it blurred the obligations this nation's advantaged society has to its disadvantaged Black citizens. Even now, every Black initiative is burdened with a universalism that requires them to share the fruits of their victory with other horizontal groups competing against Black America. Black Americans must not allow the vertical line of obligation between themselves and whites to be blurred. Blacks are injured by those who do not make distinctions between them and other minority groups. Equating other minority groups with Blacks demonstrates a poor understanding of history and hides the fact that Black people remain at the bottom of the pile. Horizontal movement to align Blacks with other minority or special interest groups erases Black America's special moral claim on our society and history. Although our labor built this country, we have not been properly recognized nor compensated. Worse, we have been treated as just another aggrieved minority group. We are reduced to just another political group with outstretched palms, a special interest vying for the same affirmative action programs as Eskimos and Salvadorians. We recapture our special moral claim and status by aspiring upward. So all this minority stuff and blended cross-racial coalition stuff, that just doesn't really work for us. And not only because we've had a unique experience in this country, but there's a special unique kind of hatred toward us that other people have never had to deal with. And so part of that solution is obviously political in terms of demanding that uniqueness that we deserve, but also part of it is us recognizing our uniqueness, us accepting that and just saying that's just what it is. That's what it's going to be. We're not letting you talk us out of what is owed to us and where we belong. You control that. You have a big part in that. And also remember this: there's nothing in America. America it's a biased country, it's a racist country, all those things. But there's nothing in America that stops you from getting together and aggregating your wealth and aggregating your resources. There's nothing in America that's going to stop you from making sure that you educate your damn kids and make sure that they're ready for the future. There's nothing. You got all the time in the world. All the time in the world. There's 8,760 hours in a year. There's 87,600 hours in a decade. So you have approximately 150,000 hours to make sure that your child is ready for economic battle. That means that you have all that time to make sure they get a proper education. You have all that time to teach them the right cultural values. You have all that time to help them accumulate wealth and assets. You have all that time to help them formulate a battle plan. So when they get out in this world and they're operating on a slippery slope, they're trying to sprint on thin ice and sliding all over the place because nobody prepared them for the future. That's on us. That is on us. That is on us. We must raise the standard. We must raise the bar. If we don't raise the bar, then who the hell's going to do it? So, so I just want you to understand that these sessions are not, let's get together and complain about white people. No, these are, sure, I don't put them on a pedestal. I'm not gonna sing their praises, but my Lord Jesus, your outcomes are heavily influenced by your decisions. And you know as well as I do that we waste a lot of time. We waste a lot of money. We have a lot of fear and weakness and cowardice and inappropriate behavior that is killing our ability to get certain things done. So what I would say to you is start where you are. Pick your bucket up where you stand and do what you can with what you got. Get those kids in your house ready for the future. You ain't gonna do anything crazy. You don't do anything dramatic or extensive unless you want to. Just make sure that make sure you don't let them get caught up in the line of thinking that's leading to so many of our kids growing up uneducated and completely unprepared for the future. Completely unprepared. That's on us. We run all of that. We control all of that. Control what is yours. Let me keep going. All right. So by the way, I'm reading from the book Powernomics by Dr. Claude Anderson. If you'd like a copy of the book, you can go to powernomics.com. I would encourage you to go to powernomics.com and buy as many copies as you can. My goal is to make sure that they sell out of their books as much as possible because this is a very important book. And I would say to you that the fact that you're here means that you are in that talented 10th. You are just as much a teacher as I am, just as much an ambassador of the message as I am. So I would encourage you to do that. One of the things I do is if you come up in my house, I got copies of Powernomics that I give away to people, the kids in the neighborhood. My daughter got this boyfriend, and I want to, every time I see him, I want to beat him up just because I don't think she should ever have a boyfriend. But you can't do that anymore. So when he comes by, what I do is I play basketball with him, and I'm giving all the kids copies of Powernomics. They don't know what the hell it is. They don't understand any of it. They hear that I'm the famous guy down the street who runs his mouth on the internet. So they get this little bit of whispering. So what I do is I make sure you understand that this is what we're all about. This is what we represent. This is who we are. And I expect you to come correct if you come up in this house, right? So set those boundaries for yourself. Decide who the hell you are and don't be scared to be that person no matter what anybody else says or anybody else thinks. So let me keep going. Let me keep reading. All right. I'm getting off that soapbox. I apologize for that, but I had to share that point of view. All right. So Black Americans must not allow the vertical line of obligation between themselves and whites to be blurred. Horizontal movement promotes the social phenomenon called crabbing among Black people. When the multitude of Black Americans are locked in the lowest horizontal level of our society, like crabs in a barrel, they cannot escape. Misery does love company. Social integration requires most of us to move laterally. We remain on the same horizontal or class level with most Blacks, even though we may have received a job promotion or moved into a new integrated suburb. Every black remains in competition with every other black for the few financial, political, and social crumbs that are available. That's because you don't control the institutions. If you controlled the institutions, then you wouldn't have to worry about these quotas they put on. Most of these corporations that are controlled by other people, where they're controlling the stuff at the top and trickling down little crumbs to you at the bottom, they have a quota. If they have more than X% of black employees, they will start to let black people go. Neighborhoods, if they have more than a certain percentage of black people there, then certain people don't want to live there anymore. So ultimately, what I would say to you is that you have to control institutions. We have to think in terms of developing systems and institutions where those institutions can be biased in our favor as opposed to always being biased in other people's favor. Instead of us always feeling like we're being victimized by someone else's infrastructure, how about we create our own infrastructure where we can become the beneficiaries of that infrastructure? So let's keep reading here. We remain on the same horizontal or class level with most blacks, even though we may have received a job promotion or moved into a new integrated suburb. Rather than competing with each other for crumbs, we compete with other class levels for the whole cake as we move vertically. So when you move vertically, you're not competing for the crumbs anymore. You're not getting the trickle down anymore. You're fighting for the whole piece of cake. That's a different kind of a battle. If there is crabbing, it will be done as a group in competition with other groups who are crabbing for their respective groups. Horizontal movement does not redistribute the ownership and control of wealth and power and resources. Instead, meaning integration. Integration does not redistribute wealth and power and resources. It keeps white folks at the top and allows you to sort of feel more comfortable because you can blend in different places. Instead, it wastes time and resources. As an example, how did moving from the back of the back to the front of the bus, from the ghetto to the suburbs, or from a black restaurant to a white restaurant, or from a black school to a white school, improve black people's ownership and control of wealth and power? Answer that question. Say something in the chat. How in the world, give me a yes or no, did we gain more wealth by riding in the front of the bus instead of the back of the bus? Yes or no? Did we gain more wealth when we moved from the ghetto to the suburbs? Not really, because that means the property value in the ghetto dropped, but the suburbs, the property values went up because we were bidding for those houses. Do we gain wealth by being able to eat in white restaurants, or does the restaurant owner gain the wealth? Do we gain wealth from our kids going from a black school to a white school? Does that give us more control of resources? Do we control those schools? Does that change the ownership structure in this country? No, it doesn't. So what has to occur is when you're talking about racial equality and racial progress, it must come with a conversation about ownership. Ownership, ownership, ownership. Who owns this? Who controls this? If we don't own and control it, then almost nothing else matters. Ownership. Ownership is what matters in America. The people that control America are the people who own things. The people who have access to resources. Everything else is just secondary. Everything else is like, a corporation. You think of it like a garden or something. Like I think about my wife's office, and it's this beautiful space. Her office is so much nicer than mine. My office is like a dude's office. I've just got books and crap just spread out everywhere, and it doesn't, look that great because I'm just not a neat person. My wife's office is so nice. It smells really good. It's perfectly feng shuied. She's got little hypnotic ticking clocks in her office because she's a therapist, and I go in her office and I just feel this great sense of calm because she has created the most pleasant environment in her office, and I'm jealous of that. And the thing about it is that all of that's kind of created and artificially manufactured due to the fact that she controls that space. Like all that matters at the end of the day is that it's her office and she gets to decide what that office is going to look like, what it's going to smell like, what it's going to feel like. Right? So my point is to say that when you're talking about things like social integration and how you feel in this society, all of that is it's designed. How do you feel working at this corporation? Do you feel that they are inclusive? Do you feel that it's a good working environment? Do you feel that you're being treated properly? All that is socially engineered by the people who own the shit. The people who own it are the ones who get to decide what that environment's going to be like. So the rest of us are almost like it's almost like we're mere mortals who are responding to the actions of the gods. The gods are the people who created the institution. If I go work at Apple and I'm looking around and I'm so impressed by how the building looks like a spaceship, and they got a nice room where I can get fresh cups of coffee, and they got the best laptops, and they have a little playground where we can go hang out and relax during lunch break. All that's there, and I get to enjoy that. But the people who actually created all that were the economic gods who control the capital and own the damn thing. The owners are the ones who decide what that environment is going to be like. So if I find myself frustrated by the environment, then I've got to go get on my knees and pray to the gods and say, please, gods of the Apple sphere, can you please give me a longer lunch break and a nicer cafeteria? So what I'm saying to you is that it's all about getting in where you fit in. It's choosing where you're going to fit in. When I go into an institution, I don't want to be victimized by the gods. I want to be a god. I want to be among the gods. I want to be one of the people that's actually in control of this. And it starts with mindset. When you're training your child to understand what it means to gather capital and what it means to own real estate and what it means to own a business and form LLCs and become an investor, you're preparing them to be an economic god. Because then once you control the money, then all the social stuff is easy. All the social stuff, like my wife can create the perfectly feng shui office that smells good and looks good and feels good because we got the money to pay the damn mortgage and own the house and control all the property that where we're defining what the environment's going to be like. But so none of that would matter if we didn't own the damn house. You ain't got to own a big house, but you got to own a house. If you know what I mean. I'm not talking about owning the house specifically. I'm talking about just, what is your house? What do you own? What is yours? And teach that to your kids. Like, just tell them, hey, you got to have something that's yours. Something where you can define in that space what that environment's going to be like. That way you won't go through life constantly feeling like a victim. We are trained from birth on how to feel like victims. Like we get victim training from the time we're one. Oh, it's so hard to be black. Oh, it's black. They took away this. When you black, if you do something, they're gonna take it away from you. They're gonna make it hard for you. Well, who's gonna make it hard? Oh, the gods. The gods. And you put them on a pedestal like the Wizard of Oz because nobody gave you God training. I want our kids to get God training, to know what it means to be an economic God. And when I say that, and I hope I don't sound sacrilegious. I know some of you may be religious, and I'm not trying to offend you at all. But think about this. What can a God do? A God can manifest. They can see a vision and create what exists in their vision. So if your child has access to capital and they have the know-how to build a business, they can come up with an idea and manifest. They're not waiting. They're not saying, well, gosh, I hope one day somebody creates a company that lets me do advertising. They can create a company and do advertising. Or they don't say, gosh, I wish somebody would put a grocery store in my neighborhood. No, they would do like the Nation of Islam, where the people in the Nation of Islam they don't say, gosh, I wish somebody would build a grocery store here. They go build a grocery store. They manifest. So what I would like for you to do is understand that when you're talking about economics in America, this is a good place for us to finish today's lesson. You've got the economic gods that control the capital, and then you've got the people that are impacted by the actions of the gods. And you don't believe the myth that you have to have a bunch of money in order to be an economic god or to control and manifest in the space that you live. No, my wife does not need a lot of resources to have a little office that's hers. Right? It's not that big, but it's hers and it's her environment. Right? It's all about having the mindset to knowing how to put yourself in position where you're in control of something. That is huge for your mental health as a Black person. I can tell you that being black in this country and feeling like you have no control over anything, that is the easiest pathway to depression. Studies show that depressed people tend to be people who feel like they have no control over their environment. So if you ever want to really be depressed, convince yourself that you have no say in the outcome of your life. That will depress the hell out of you. It even works with rats. They found that rats are more depressed when they feel like they can't change their situation. So never get caught in that trap. This is a spiritual battle on every level, and that's where I want you to be prepared for. Okay. All right. So that's it for today. Next Wednesday at 8:30, we're going to get together again. I hope that this conversation was helpful to you. I hope you learned a lot. Also, I want to remind you that the convention, in about a week or so, we're going to do another short discount on convention tickets. So if you haven't bought your tickets yet, you can wait maybe about a week or so, and I will email out a discount. So just make sure you're on the email list, though. If you go to blackkeystogreatness.com or boycewatkins.com, you can maybe get my stock picks or something, and you'll be on the list, and I'll email you stuff. If you're already getting emails from me, you'll hear back on that. Also, if you want to get copies of all the lectures that we've done with these Wednesday night book club meetings, just go to drboycebookclub.com. All of it's there. You can have it. It's all yours for life. There's about 50 different lectures I've done on this, and I'm going to keep going until we get all the way through every single book written by Dr. Claude Anderson, and then we're going to start on some of these other great books that are out here also. So thank you guys. It was great to see you, and I love you, and I will check you guys out next week. So have a good one. Take care now. Bye-bye.